Of all the penciled comics that we've looked through on this channel, this is by far the best one I've seen so far. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Thomas Patilli. I'm a comic book artist and an illustrator. And today we're going to be looking at the rough cut edition of Fantastic Four by Alan Davis. I didn't actually know this comic existed. This was a request I got from some of you in the comments. Thank you very much. Lately, I've been doing a lot of penciled comic art videos, and we've been looking through some rough cuts as well as some DC versions of rough cuts. And when someone suggested this Alan Davis Fantastic Four rough cut, I assumed it was going to be the Heroes Return Fantastic Four that Alan Davis worked on back in the 90s. That's actually how I became familiar with his art first. Actually, come to think of it, I think the first time I saw Alan Davis's comic art was in a Gen 13 bootleg issue. I think it was a two-parter. And then shortly after that would have been his run on Fantastic Four Heroes Return. And then after that, I followed him on, I think it was an X-Men run sometime in the late 90s, perhaps even early 2000s. After that, I didn't really keep up with his work all that much. It seems like this Fantastic Four series that he was working on was back in 2007. I didn't even know they were making rough cuts into the 2000s. I thought this was really just like a little 90s phenomenon thing, and they didn't go much further. So if any of you know any other rough cut editions that I might not know of, leave those in the comments below. So far, we've looked at John Romita's Thor, Ron Garney's Captain America, Jim Lee's Superman, although that wasn't a Marvel rough cut, of course. And now we're looking at this Fantastic Four. And like I said, this is some of the best penciled comic art I think I've ever seen. It's just beautiful. It's so clean. It's so like fully realized and finished. And it really looks like someone who just loves to draw. It's detailed, it's labored over, but it feels like it's a labor of love. I believe he wrote and drew this issue, and like all of the rough cuts, the script is in the back, so you could compare what the written word reads like versus how it was interpreted with art. And so far, like all of these rough cuts, they all seem to be written in Marvel style, which is more of like a plot style. Marvel style, I made a video about it, I'll link it somewhere over here, was much more catered to the artist. Essentially, the writer would write a summary of what they wanted to be happening on the page, and then the artist would pace it out in panel form, and they would also contribute a lot more to the story by adding things that perhaps the writer didn't specifically write into the script. The writer would then react to the artwork that the artist created, and on top of that would create the dialogue and the narration and all of that stuff. So Marvel style writing is very different than the way most comics in the mainstream are written today, which is based off of a full script, which is a lot more like a movie script or a TV script. That approach definitely gives more control to the writer, whereas this Marvel style left it up much more to the artist, and it was much more of a collaborative effort. And I think it's one of the reasons why comics of a certain era read differently than comics today read. Anyway, since Alan Davis was writing himself here, he was going to draw his own writing, it makes sense that he wrote in a Marvel style script instead of like a full script. I'm assuming that the writing that he had to actually put into words here was probably more for the editors, just to get approval of the story before he started drawing things. Whereas if this wasn't for a big publisher, perhaps he might not have even had to have gone into that much of a detailed plot or a script. I don't know specifically how Alan Davis works, but that would just be my guess in terms of the formality of a script like this. And speaking of not knowing too much about Alan Davis's process, I really don't actually. I don't know too much of his biography or his full comic history outside of the few comics that I mentioned that I used to read when I was a kid. And sometimes I kind of like that when I'm doing videos like this, because I'm able to separate what I know of the artist and sort of my own fandom for that particular artist and the work itself. In a recent video, I was talking about how my own penciling process is evolving, and I'm going a little bit deeper into that process, paying attention to that particular stage in the comic art making process. And after looking through this book, I was definitely very inspired to pick up the pencil and start drawing. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to draw a Fantastic Four related character? I know some of you might have seen that new Fantastic Four trailer. Everybody's got their own opinions about it. I'll keep mine to myself, but I decided to draw Silver Surfer, a sort of classic Silver Age Marvel character and very much associated with Fantastic Four. Obviously, he even makes a little quick appearance in this particular issue. And I tried my best to pay homage to the great Jack Kirby and John Buscema, two artists that I really think about when I think of classic Silver Surfer images. And I really tried to get into the overall composition, especially the background elements of the way they would draw space and the planets, and just all that fun reflective light of Silver Surfer's design. It was really cool to just dive into an image like this strictly in pencil. I do plan on inking this. I'm going to ink it very soon actually, but I recorded the full process of penciling this Silver Surfer image. And if you're interested in seeing that full video is going to be up on my Patreon. I've been mentioning it a lot in these recent videos, but Patreon is a place where I'm adding a lot of bonus material that goes along with these YouTube videos, as well as a bunch of additional content that I'm not sharing anywhere else. So these are process videos, sneak peeks and first looks at things that I'm currently working on, and then just sharing some cool stuff with all of you over there. I kind of look at it like it's a clubhouse. We're all into comic art. Some of us are pursuing comic art. And so the page has an educational bent to it, but it's also there for people who are just really into comic art and passionate about the process of making comics. So if you're interested in joining it, that's where I'm spending a lot of my time lately. I'd love to see you there. I'll leave a link in the description. And if you do sign up, you can see the full process video behind me penciling this Silver Surfer image. Anyway, like I said, I think this might be the best penciled comic art we're going to look at on this channel so far. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to open up this awesome Fantastic Four rough cut edition by Alan Davis, and let's all appreciate these beautiful pencils. I thought a different place to start in these books, since we've done a few of these rough cuts so far, might be just to go in the back real quick and just see how the written word translates to the final visual representation of what was written in the script. Most of the time, these comics start off in a written word in some form of a script. And because this was written in a Marvel style, it was more like a plot way of writing. And as you can see here, it's just a real simple, 2 paragraphs for page 1, which is going to be a splash page that's just indicated here in the script. But I'm just going to read the first 3 sentences here that really describe the whole page. And then I would love for you to just take a second, maybe pause the video and imagine how you might, if you are an artist yourself, or even if you're not an artist, what that description might look like in a visual comic splash page. How might you imagine that visually? And then, of course, I'll show you what it looks like in this comic and how Alan Davis chose to compose that image based on this writing. So page 1, it's a splash page indicated here. A cyborg augmented Dr. Doom tosses the FF around like rag dolls. Energy coruscating from crudely riveted extra limbs that appear more insect than human. The FF are already torn up, battered, and bruised. This certainly appears like it could well be the end for our heroes. It's a pretty dramatic opening for a comic book, but also very much in the vein of a classic superhero comic. But that's pretty much the basic idea of this page. If you want to take a second, especially if you've never seen this comic before, and just imagine what that might look like in your head. And now I'm going to flip back to that first page, and we could compare and see what your version looked like in your head and then what Alan Davis drew up. I'd say that's pretty cool right there. That definitely looks like they are being, what did he say? Tossed around like rag dolls. The Fantastic Four are. Looks like they may have met their match with this insect-like Doctor Doom, who has like extra limbs, I guess, robotic limbs. Pretty wild. Look at Reed's face right there. But yeah, I just thought it'd be an interesting exercise to show how a comic book artist goes from the written word. Again, in this particular case, it's a little different because Alan Davis is writing for himself, but most of the time, the artist is working off of something just like that. It's just a written word that the writer is trying their best to put their idea into the mind of the artist and then see how that artist kind of spews it out on the page. And the cool thing about comic art is that you could have 10 different comic artists read the same script and you're going to get 10 very different interpretations of that script. And when I look at this Alan Davis comic, I could really see an artist who seems to me to have been influenced very much by that Kirby era. Based on Alan Davis's age, it seems like he would have grown up reading those comics. And I'm sure so much of that, whether purposefully or not, has seeped into his instinctive way of telling a story. And then, of course, it's evolved and developed based on all the other influences that he might have took in over time. And then, of course, just more drawing, developing and getting better as an artist. And next thing you know, you're kind of your own artist. But those influences are always going to be there. There's always sort of a skeleton, a framework of those very early influences that inspired you the most to draw when you were younger. And I can really see that in this Alan Davis artwork for sure. The other thing I could see is just a really high skill level of drawing. Look at that face. That's just a really well-drawn face. Alan Davis has what all the great comic artists have, which is a very strong draftsmanship. I mean, you look at a face like that, it has all the lighting, all the accurate anatomy, differentiation between different textures like the hair, the skin, his costume. So you have all the beautiful draftsmanship that any great illustrator would have. Plus, you have a really great sense of design as well. He's doing some of his own sound effects, lettering here. The page design itself is really, really well thought out and dynamic. I mean, this isn't a double page spread, but look at how these two pages independently look next to each other. That is something that a good comic artist thinks about from both a storytelling and design aspect, which is how these pages are going to look next to each other, whether they connect to make one full image or not. So he has the draftsmanship, he has the design, and then he just has a really great sense of storytelling as well. He's the director of this movie and the cinematographer as well. So there are plenty of artists that can draw really nice faces and maybe do portraiture and all that kind of stuff, but not every artist can do that in addition to all the other things that come with creating a comic. It's one of the reasons why I love comic art so much, because it encompasses so many different areas of art making, and it packages it all together into this thing called a comic book. And for me, whether or not I'm interested in the characters or the story itself, that's almost secondary or even further down the list, to be honest. To me, it's just a beautiful art form that I really just get a kick out of looking at. And ever since I was a kid, it has inspired me to want to make my own. And that quest that starts from a purely visual kind of inspiration really starts to evolve into something more than that, which is to also want to tell a story with these pictures that I draw. And I think at their best, comics like this, certainly, the behind the scenes penciled version of these comics really just inspire me to want to keep doing that and to keep doing it at a very high level, to try and push myself to reach the heights of so many of these great artists that we look at in these videos. And after looking through this book, Alan Davis for sure is definitely joining the ranks of many of these great artists that we've looked at so far on this channel, including the likes of Ramita and Buscema. And you can see here in his backgrounds, he's really referencing so much of that era. These are all very much like Kirby machinery designs that he's kind of taking to that next level. Steve Rude also does this really well, where he's very much inspired by the worlds that Kirby would have created, and then almost filtering them through a more traditional, illustrated, perhaps mature depiction of some of these designs. There's just some really beautiful rendering on these pages and over these figures, all the shadowing. That's one of the things that I remember noticing when I was a kid about Alan Davis's work, was just the way he would shadow everyone. There's the Silver Surfer over there, one of the harder characters to draw, just because you can't hide under any costume or anything like that. It's all just pure anatomy. And then speaking of shadows and lighting, he's just like this one reflective light bulb or something like that. So it's like three challenges in one when drawing the Silver Surfer, but that's just so beautifully drawn. I mean, just look at that. That's just like a great piece of anatomy to study right there. But his rendering of the characters and all the different textures, he's almost perfectly fit for drawing superhero comics. The rendering is one of the hardest things, I think, to accomplish in that particular comic medium, because there's just so many different types of costumes. Some are made out of iron or metal. Some of them are more cloth material. Some of them are, alien skin, whatever it might be. And you have to create a shorthand for all of these different textures. And then, of course, set all of those characters apart from whatever environment they're in. But man, look at that shot. That's a tough angle to draw. You're seeing the bottom of these boots over here, this whole ship, all of these little characters in the background. And every piece of this is drawn with the same level of care and detail. Looking at Alan Davis's work reminds me of something that I think about quite a bit when I look at different artists' work, which is that based upon the lines that they put down and the way they render things and the consistency at which they draw their comics, and by that I mean the consistency of style and care and attention to detail throughout the comic. It reminds me that when I look at stuff like this and I look at these lines, I kind of get an indication, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong in this, but it seems to indicate the artist's like temperament. I feel like there's almost an insight as to what their personality might be like, just in terms of the lines that they put down and the way they draw. There's a real, methodical way that it seems Alan Davis draws, and just a real level of focus at which he draws with. And to me, that indicates someone who is very patient, perhaps, in their drawing process, and also very focused and present when they are drawing. This doesn't look like someone who is all that distracted. It also looks like someone who gets great pleasure out of drawing, drawing the thing and all the little rock formations, but then also just drawing all these very soft and idyllic backgrounds back here as well. They're all drawn with the same level of care and detail, and also just like softness too. It doesn't feel like it's rushed through. It doesn't feel like it's drawn kinetically or with a heavy hand. I mean, just in a panel like this, the superhero stuff is really an afterthought. This is really just a beautiful illustration of like a hummingbird and plant life and nature. You have to really love to draw to be able to draw at this level. It's apparent, I would assume, that he really does love to draw superheroes and he is inspired by that stuff. But it seems that he's also just an artist first. And that really just shows through in the artwork. And like I said, there's something about perhaps his temperament that probably shows through in the work itself. I could also be completely wrong in that theory. Maybe he's just frantically drawing all of these pages and breaking pencil leads as he goes. But there's something about different mark making that I think is sometimes almost like handwriting in a way, an indication of that particular artist's temperament and just overall personality, perhaps. Looking through these Alan Davis pencils, I could see where perhaps an artist maybe like Stuart Immonen might be influenced by his work. That realistic and almost cinematic approach to lighting is the thing that I think they both have in their comic work, and I think would be a real challenge to ink as well. I'm pretty sure that this particular comic was inked by Mark Farmer. Alan Davis and Mark Farmer are sort of like one of those classic comic book penciler and inker duos, much like a Jim Lee and a Scott Williams. They seem to work very, very well together and are perfectly suited for each other's artistic sensibilities. But as detailed as these pencils are, I think it would be difficult to ink them because pencils are very like forgiving in their own way. They have a certain kind of range that obviously inks don't have. There's a nuance to pencils. And so much of the appeal of this penciled work is that nuance, those gradients that sort of happen, the blending that happens naturally when you just start to render and shade with pencil. But then when you're an inker, you're thinking in strictly black and white. There actually is no nuance. And so it's up to you to use all different techniques to interpret some of that nuance that is in the pencils and to interpret it in a way that is just black and white, that is going to print well, read clearly, and look good when there's colors on top of it. So it's a real tall order, but Mark Farmer is one of the best in the business. So if anyone can do it, he can. But that's the issue. It's a pretty short issue. It's probably just 22 pages. There's just so much beauty and on every panel and on every page. I tried to film this one pretty close up just because I was hoping to be able to get across all the beautiful line work and details and nuances that are in this penciled art. But I'll just flip backwards just so you can see these spreads right now. They're just really, really wonderful. I mean, those are amazing pencils, right? If that doesn't want to make you start sharpening your pencils, I don't know what will. I hope you enjoyed this look at Alan Davis's penciled issue, the rough cut edition of his Fantastic Four The End series. I'm really having a blast looking through these penciled issues of comics. And like I mentioned, this particular issue came as a recommendation from some of you in the comment section of one of my other videos. So if you know of any other ones, please do keep recommending some really great penciled comic issues. I'd love to take a look at more of these here on this channel. I have a few others on my list for upcoming videos, but I'm sure there's stuff out there that I'm not aware of. Like I mentioned before, if you want to watch the full penciled process video behind the creation of a recent Silver Surfer image that I made, sort of inspired by not only the Fantastic Four movie trailer and all the hype that's around that right now, but also this particular Alan Davis issue. I guess Fantastic Four is kind of top of mind for a lot of us right now. So I thought it would be cool to draw Silver Surfer. I'm gonna ink that really soon and probably make a process video for that as well. All of those long form process videos, whether it's for penciling, inking, or anything else, I'm putting all that stuff up on my Patreon recently. So if you're interested in seeing bonus material from these videos, as well as a bunch of other longer form videos that I'm not putting anywhere else, I'll put that link in the description. Please do check that out if you're interested in joining me over there. And if you want to keep in touch here on YouTube and see more of my videos when they first come out, please do hit that subscribe button. The channel is growing, which is awesome. I recently did my 10K Q&A video, and since then we're already well past 10K subscribers. So thank you very much to everyone who has subscribed so far. And like I said, if you want to keep up to date with all of my videos and see what I'm putting out on a more consistent basis, please do hit that subscribe button. All right, well, that's all I got for this video. I got some really cool videos planned upcoming, and I'm looking forward to sharing those with you. More process stuff, more fun comics to share with you, artists to look at. I'm really excited. I hope you are. Until then, though, Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.